again. Today we're going to learn how to make something that is probably more American than apple pie. It's also a major holiday favorite in the United States. Today we're going to learn about pumpkin pie. Now, why is it more American than apple pie? Well, because pumpkins are actually from the Americas, whereas apples are an imported product. When Americans think of pumpkins, we sort of think of two different things. We either think of the variety that you carve and make into a cute jack-o'-lantern around Halloween, or the kind that comes in a can and that we use to make pumpkin pie, pumpkin bars, anything pumpkin around the winter holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Pumpkin pie, or canned pumpkin rather, isn't really something you find a lot of places all over the world. So today I'm going to show you how to make an American favorite, a pumpkin pie, but using a pumpkin actually instead of the canned variety. So we'll take that away and we'll talk about what do you need to make a pumpkin pie from scratch, meaning starting with a pumpkin. We have a variety of ingredients that you will need. First of all, you will need about 3 cups of pumpkin, and I'm going to call this pumpkin goop because that's exactly what it is. This is a pumpkin that I took last week and I cut it and I steamed it, and once it's steamed for probably about 20-25 minutes, then all you have to do is just scoop the goop out, put it into a container, and it's ready to go. It's very easy, it's very simple. There are tons of websites that you can look at that will show you exactly what to do. To make your pie, besides these 3 cups of pumpkin goo, you also need about 2 cups of milk. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less. It sort of just depends on how thin or thick you want your batter to be. I'm going to start out with about 2 cups, and probably that's going to be more than what I need. You also will want 4 eggs. Pumpkin pie is a custard pie. And so 4 eggs, if you want it to be even more custardy, you can actually just add 3. And for the last of our wet ingredients, you'll want just a ½ teaspoon of vanilla if you like that flavor. If you don't like it, you don't have to put it in. That's no problem. To add a little bit of sweet to our savory pumpkin, we're going to add about a cup of sugar. If you're watching your sugar intake, feel free to add less or to substitute. You can actually substitute anything that's sweet, including honey. So if you don't prefer to have the white sugar, feel free to play around with that a little bit. And then your spice mixture. Beyond your salt, which will just help bring out some of the flavors in this mixture, you're also going to need a 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, a teaspoon of ginger, and a ½ teaspoon of cloves. And if you like cloves, you can add more in. I personally love cloves, so I always add a little bit more. Finally, the last thing you're going to need is another pie crust. So you already know how to do that. 1/3 cup of your shortening, 1 cup of your butter or of your flour, cut them together, add a little bit of salt, add a little bit of water, roll it out, pumpkin pie or pie crust. And so you need to make sure you don't bake it because it'll actually bake while you're baking the pie. And that's all that you need to make a delicious pumpkin pie. No canned pumpkin necessary. So how do you do this? Well, it's very simple. There's no order to this. You can add wet ingredients and then dry ingredients, whatever you want. Because we're not dealing with flour, it's a little bit easier. So you just take your cup of pumpkin goo, and you can notice that it's actually quite watery, and that's something that happens when you make the pumpkin yourself from an original pumpkin instead of getting it from the can. If you've ever used canned pumpkin before, you'll notice that it's actually a lot less watery. That's okay. This recipe is built around this wateriness, so don't worry that if it looks a little bit more liquid than you're used to. And then we're going to add the eggs next. I'm going to actually wait until the end to add my milk just because I want to know how liquidy it's going to be. So again, my 4 eggs, and if you want it to be sort of a thicker pie, go ahead and just add 3. Either way, it'll work out. And that also has the vanilla already added in. And then to sort of thicken it just a little bit, we have our 1 cup of sugar. I like things very sweet. And of course, for the flavoring, we want to add in these spices. So again, your ginger, your cinnamon, your cloves, and just a little bit of salt for flavor. And again, if you're watching your salt intake, feel free to just leave that out. It's not critical to this recipe. So at this point, before we put in the milk, I'm actually just going to stir it up a little bit. Just grab a wire whisk. You don't need to beat this for a really long time. You're just going to put it together until everything is combined. And you can see it's actually a pretty thick mixture already. But you do want to add in a little bit of that milk because it's, again, similar to the quiche. It's sort of this custard base. And a custard base has to have milk in it. You can use evaporated milk if you can't get access to it. Do not use sweetened condensed. That will just ruin your pie. You can just use regular milk. Probably a higher fat content is better just for the sort of mouthfeel of how this pie will be, but like today I'm using just sort of a mixture of sort of half and half and like 2% milk. So really any milk that you add is going to be fine. And I'm just going to add maybe about 1.5 cups of this. Again, I don't want it to be too thin, and I've already added those 4 eggs, so it's going to be slightly thinner than it would have been had I just added 3. But I think this is looking pretty good. So again, probably about 1.5 cups of milk here. You can go up to 3 cups if you want to, but I think that this is going to be really fine. Again, if you're used to working with the canned pumpkin, this is going to be looking a little bit anemic or a little bit less colorful than you might be used to. But because if you remember how lightly colored this pumpkin was, this is actually quite fine. And again, it doesn't take very long, just a couple of stirs, just until it's incorporated and your sugar is dissolved, and that's really all you need to do. So it should look a little bit like this. You can see all the spices floating in there. There's no chunks of anything. And so you're just going to take your pie crust and you're just going to sort of dump this in there. You do want to be careful. This is not going to expand a lot when you're cooking it, but if you overfill it, it's going to make your life really tough. So make sure that you leave just a little bit of pie crust at the top, probably like that. And it's often that when you're making a pumpkin pie, whether it's from the can or from scratch, that you're going to end up with a little bit left over. My grandmother used to love to just take a spoon and eat this. If you want, you can actually just put this in sort of a glass, some sort of an oven glass bowl, and you can actually just make kind of like a pumpkin pudding out of it if you want to, or you can just dump it down the drain, your choice. What you're going to do with this now is you're going to put it into your preheated oven, and this one's going to take a little bit of watching, because for the first 15 minutes you're going to bake it at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 210 degrees Celsius. And then after that first 15 minutes, you're actually going to turn the heat down to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 175 degrees Celsius. And then you're going to bake it for 40 to 60 minutes until the top is slightly rounded, you're getting a little bit of brown, and when you take a butter knife and insert it into the middle of the pie, it comes out with not a lot of pumpkin goo sort of sticking to it. We'll show you what we mean in just a few minutes. So after between 40 and 60 minutes after you've turned the temperature down, you should end up with something that looks like this. You'll notice it's not really orange. When we think of pumpkins, we think of orange. A pumpkin pie is actually going to be sort of a pretty brown, and especially around the outside crust area, it should just be slightly more brown. You can see that if you move this table a little bit, it actually is jiggling. That's because this is a custard pie. So you do want to let it rest for a few minutes before you serve it. And actually, traditionally in the US, we serve this pie cold. You can serve it warm if you want to, but usually we stick it in the fridge for even overnight. We'll sort of let the flavors sort of meld and mellow together. And tomorrow, this is going to be an absolutely delicious pie. Traditional ways to serve this in the United States is basically just either plain or with a little bit of whipped cream. So if you want to add whipped cream, that is certainly an American thing to do. Some people will even put chocolate on this, but I sort of think that this is pretty much perfection. Why would you mess with it? The way to know that your pie is done is just to simply insert a butter knife into the center of the pie, and if it comes out and doesn't leave any pumpkin behind, you know you're done. But again, if you don't want to mar the beauty of your pie by doing that, just as long as you can see that you've sort of gotten it starting to really bake up nice here on the top, you're probably pretty good. So there you go. Pumpkin pie is an American holiday tradition. I hope you try it out and leave us a comment in the comment section and let us know how it works for you.